In Module 3, Lesson 8, we're going to continue ordering integers and rational numbers. So in example 1, Sam has $10 in the bank. He owes his friend Hank $2.25. He owes his sister $1.75. So considering the three rational numbers, we need to write and order them from least to greatest. First of all, let's make clear what these three numbers are. If Sam has $10 in the bank, that's a positive number. Next, they tell us that he owes his friend Hank $2.25. If he owes, that's a negative number. So our second number is negative 2 and 25 hundredths. And then he owes his sister $1.75, which is also a negative number because he owes. So those are our three rational numbers first. Now they ask us to write them in order from least to greatest. Hopefully we know 10 is the greatest, so we don't have to worry about that one. In comparing negative 2 and 25 hundredths and negative 1 and 75 hundredths, if you cannot determine that on your own, please make sure that you draw a number line and place those numbers on the number line. But negative 2 and 25 hundredths is further to the left on the number line, because when we work from 0 in the negative direction, we start at 0 and we count negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and so on. So negative 2 and 25 hundredths would be further to the left than negative 1 and 75 hundredths. And finally, our positive 10 would be the greatest. Exercises 2 through 4 ask us to do the same thing. We're going to order them from least to greatest and explain how. But before we order them from least to greatest, we need to write the numbers for the situation, and then we can put them in order. Exercise 2 talks about a visit to the optometrist, which is an eye doctor. And Kadisha and her sister Beth had their vision tested. Kadisha's vision in her left eye was negative 1 and 50 hundredths, and in her right eye was the opposite number. Okay, so we have negative 1 and 50 hundredths. The opposite of negative 1 and 50 hundredths is positive 1 and 50 hundredths. There's the second number. Beth's vision was negative 1 in her left eye. And we can put 0 hundredths, it'll be easier to compare. And positive 25 hundredths in her right eye. We are ordering these numbers from least to greatest according to our directions. So furthest to the left on the number line would be negative 1 and 50 hundredths. Then would be negative 1. Then would be 25 hundredths, and finally 1 and 50 hundredths. Least to greatest. Question 3. There are 3 letters in Miss Thomas's mailbox. There's a bill from a phone company. A bill is money that you owe, so that's a negative number, 38 and 12 hundredths. A bill from the electric company, again, is money that you owe, so that is negative 67 and 55 hundredths. And a tax refund check, which is money that is being given to you, so that is a positive number, 25 and 89 hundredths. If we put them in order from least to greatest, furthest to the left on the number line would be negative 67 and 55 hundredths. Then we would have negative 38 and 12 hundredths. And finally, our positive amount, positive 25 and 89 hundredths. And then, in question 4, Monica, Jack, and Destiny each had their arm length measured, and they compared their arm lengths to a standard of 22 inches. The amounts they are giving are how their arms relate to 22 inches. And just as a side note, that would mean that the 0 in this particular problem is 22 inches. It is our standard. So negative 1/8 means that it is 1/8 of an inch below 22 inches. And 1 3/4 means that it is 1 3/4 inches above 22 inches. And negative 1/2 means that it is 1/2 inches below 22 inches. The 0 in our problem is 22 inches, the standard that we're comparing. Now, to order those numbers from least to greatest, we need the number that is furthest to the left, which would be negative 1/2. And then our other negative number. And finally, the positive number, 1 3/4, would be the greatest. Example 2, ordering rational numbers from greatest to least. This is the opposite of what we were doing before. Jason is entering college and has opened a checking account, which he will use for college expenses. His parents gave him $200 to deposit into the account, so that would be a positive number. Jason wrote a check for $85. That's a negative number because he's losing money. And a check for $25.34, which is also negative because he's paying money. So there are our 3 rational numbers, and we want to order them from greatest to least. So now we are starting to the right and working our way to the left. The number furthest to the right on our number line would be our positive number, the 200. And then as we move to the left of 0, remember when you count to the left of 0, you start at 0 and go to negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. And as we continue in that pattern, we're going to encounter negative 25 and 34/100ths first. And then continuing to the left, we'll encounter negative 85. So in order from greatest to least, 200, negative 25 and 34/100ths, and then negative 85. And in exercise 5 and 6, we'll practice that. Number 5, we have 3 bills that Mr. McGraw must pay. The first one is cable and internet, and these are bills, so that's a negative 122 and 0 cents. The gas and electric, again, this is a bill, so it is negative 73 and 45/100ths. And the cell phone bill, again, it's a bill, so it's a negative $45, 0 cents. And we are going to put them in order from greatest to least. Always make sure that you look back at your directions. So greatest to least, we're looking for the number that is furthest to the right on our number line. And since all 3 numbers are negative numbers, we need to consider 0 and then working backwards from 0. If 0 were here, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, and continuing counting that way, we would encounter the negative 45 first. Then, continuing to count, we would next encounter the 73, negative 73 and 45/100ths. And then finally, a little bit further along, we would encounter the negative 122 and 0/100ths. So greatest to least, negative 45, negative 73 and 45/100ths, and negative 22. And in exercise 6, they ask us to arrange these rational numbers in order from greatest to least. We have a negative 1/3, 0, negative 1/5, and 1/8. Now, if I'm going greatest to least, I know that I'm going to start with 1/8 because it's the only positive number there. I know that the next number would be 0 because the other two numbers are negative, and we are working from right to left on the number line. The final two numbers, -1/3 and -1/5, would be determined by which one is closest to 0. And the larger the denominator, the smaller the piece. So if I were to look at the number line, I would encounter -1/5 first because it's closer to 0. But just to prove that, let's get some common denominators for these two fractions because this can be confusing. So if I take 1/3, -1/3, and -1/5, the common denominator for 3 and 5 would be 15. And then I'll need to determine what I do to the original denominator to get 15. And I multiplied 3 by 5 to get that. I have to do the same thing to the numerator. And then with the second fraction, -1/5, I multiply 5 by 3 to get 15. So I'll have to multiply my numerator by 3 as well. And the equivalent fraction would be -3/15. Now our question was, which one, because we are arranging our numbers from greatest to least. We started with a positive 1/8, then we went to 0. Now we need to go to the number closer to 0, which is -3/15. And finally, we would get to -5/15. In order, greatest to least, 1/8, 0, -3/15, which we could replace with the original number, which was -1/5. So let's replace that, -1/5. And finally, -5/15, which we should replace then with its original number, which was -1/3.